Welcome to The Third Story. I'm Leo Sidran. Today's conversation features Indian vocalist Falu. Born in Mumbai, Falguni Shah was raised with a musical mother who she says started training her in Indian classical singing when she was barely 3 years old. By the time she graduated from college, she had spent the majority of her life literally living inside the music, and she was determined to devote her life to singing. She's lived in the United States since 2000. In January of this year, the Economic Times of India listed Falu among the 20 most influential global Indian women. In 2005, she was asked to serve as one of Carnegie Hall's musical ambassadors to New York City, and in her case, it's clear that she really did get there by practice. This episode is a wonderful companion piece to the previous Third Story episode featuring Alex Cuba. Both artists were raised immersed in their native cultures and both came to master their crafts at home. But it was only when they left their home country for North America that they were able to find real freedom and artistry to create something new and innovative. And in both cases, their main means of transportation was love. In Falu's case, she connected with a group of American musicians who were raised in jazz, classical, and American pop music, but were curious about her tradition. The mix of people and backgrounds ultimately led to the creation of what they called Indie Hindi. She says, "I think coming to the States has been the best thing in my life. The embrace and the welcome that I've gotten here, I don't think people in India would have been so open-minded about what I'm doing, especially back when we started." Interestingly, her music has been very well received in India. She says, "I feel that I've opened up doors for middle-class people in India to pursue their dreams." I loved this conversation in part because it illuminated so many questions I have about India and the relationship that Americans have with Indian music and culture, ranging from the importance of the Beatles and opening up the channel between Western pop music and Indian classical music, the connection between the escapism of Broadway musicals and of Bollywood films, and the modern American fascination with yoga. If you haven't subscribed to The Third Story, you can go to third-story.com where you can sign up to the mailing list or directly from the iTunes Music Store. You can also find me on Facebook. It's The Third Story with Leo Sidran. And now on SoundCloud, too. I tweet at Leo Sidran. Before we get started with the conversation, I want to play a beautiful piece from Falu's most recent record, Forest Road. Here's Govind.
Karar vinde napadar vindam mukhar vinde viniveshayantam vatasya patrasya puteshayanam valam mukundam manasa smarami valam mukundam manasa smarami. Shri Krishna Govinda Hare Murare He Nath Narayan Vasudeva Jivhe Pibasva Mrutmet Deva Govind Damodar Madhaveti Govind Damodar Madhaveti. Vikretu kama kil gop kanya murari padarpit chitta vrittihi datyadikam mohavshad vochat Govind damodar madhaveti Govind damodar madhaveti. Gruhe Pavadhukadamba sarve militva samvapya yogam punyani namani pathanti nityam Govind damodar madhaveti Govind damodar madhaveti.
सुखं शयाना निलये निजेऽपि नामानि विष्णोः प्रवदन्ति मर्त्याः ते निश्चितं तन्मयतां व्रजन्ति गोविन्द दामोदर माधवेति गोविन्द दामोदर माधवेति
जिह्वे सदैवं भज सुन्दराणि नामानि कृष्णस्य मनोहराणि समस्तभक्तार्तिविनाशनानि गोविन्द दामोदर माधवेति
गोविन्द दामोदर माधवेति सुखावसाने इदमेव सारं दुःखावसाने इदमेव ज्ञेयं देहावसाने इदमेव जाप्यं गोविन्द दामोदर माधवेति गोविन्द दामोदर माधवेति
श्रीकृष्ण राधा वर गोकुलेश गोपाल गोवर्धननाथ विष्णु जिह्वे पिबस्वामृतमेत देव गोविन्द दामोदर माधवेति गोविन्द दामोदर माधवेति गोविन्द दामोदर माधवेति गोविन्द दामोदर माधवेति.
Falu, thank you so much for being here today. We've never met.
Yes, nice to meet you.
Likewise. It seems that you moved to the States about 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
What was your life like in India before you moved here?
It's nice you asked me that question because I don't generally visit my past that much anymore because life just makes you very, very busy with your day-to-day stuff. Well, I was born in a musical family. My mother sings, and so did my mother's mothers. Both my grandmother as well as my mother, they both sang Indian classical music. So growing up, music was a part of our household. There was nothing where there was no music, not a single occasion. If there was a festival, we would have a song for that. If there is a birthday, we'd have a song for that. If there was a death in the family, we had songs for that, to calm us down and to meditate and go in the spiritual aspect. I grew up, obviously, in a Hindu religion, Hindu household. We practiced Hinduism growing up. So I'm very aware of the Vedic chants and the old traditional hymns and Upanishads and Vedas and all that rendering is something I grew up with, along with classical music, North Indian. My mother was very strict. Yeah, I had a very strict mom and I had a very non-strict dad. My dad was a businessman. He was in stock market. He was very supportive, but I don't think he would, if it was just him, I'd never be a musician. It was my mother's whacking and my mother's strictness that made me disciplined in the first place. So she would be so strict that at the age of 2.5, she started teaching me, like ragas, Indian melodic scales. Mm-hmm. They are called ragas. And every bite she would feed me, I had to first say, sa re ga ma pa da ni sa ni da pa ma ga re sa, and only then I'd get my second bite of lunch, dinner, breakfast, anything. So without music, I couldn't even eat. That's how music was an integral part of my house. And then when she saw that I had a little bit of talent, she decided to put me in a proper class, and my training started at 3 years old. Now, when I say training, it's vigorous training. It's not like a child training. When you go to purist classical teachers in India, no matter what age you are, from day one, they teach you the traditions. They teach you the importance of this culture and the importance of surviving the tradition that's been there for 5,000 years. Because our music is not written. It's oral. So it has been passed on to us from generations, and I would be the 11th generation of that lineage. So if they give us any freedom, then that tradition is going to go. So it's a very strict, pure, I would say, and a very deep, soulful tradition. So we don't mess with that. My teacher was strict as well. So I think I didn't have a childhood, honestly, because my art was so intense that you had to go to school. There was no option. But after going to school, instead of going and playing in a playground, which I did sometimes, I'd rather be in a class learning. So it was very strict.
What is the role of that music in the culture? It seems like it's very tied to rituals, festivals, auspicious moments in the year.
That's a part of it. It's not the classical music. That's folk music. Folk and the spiritual music is tied to that.
Right.
But the classical music is universal. It's not tied to any one religion or any one ritual. It is just universal. And I grew up with both, learning both.
Yeah.
So folk is, when you grow up in India, it's when you have Holi, you sing Holi songs. So every child is exposed to that.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily glue to that, but they're exposed. And music is a way of life. It's in their daily routine. When you worship, you start with the puja, with an arti or a dhun. And then when you go to a temple, you hear the same dhun. In the school, you start with the same prayer. So it's just a part of growing up. Every kid is exposed to that. It depends on the kid how much they take.
Then in terms of studying classical music, was the intention always that you would become a professional singer in some way, that music would be a profession for you?
No. My mother didn't plan like that. Although she was a professional singer, she didn't force me. She just forced me to be good, to study, to be disciplined, to be true to what you're doing. Don't just mess around, and don't make fun of this music, and don't take it for granted, because it's a beautiful tradition. I actually decided at 6 years of age that I wanted to do this as a profession. And at that time, I didn't even know what a profession was. But when I saw my mother singing on stage, I'm like, I want to be like that. I want to do what she's doing.
Yeah.
Not knowing what she went through, the training part.
Was it unusual? What kind of music did your friends listen to? Were you unusual to be young and interested in this music?
I was a geek, yes. I was a nerd, and I didn't belong, and I had very little friends. My family was very supportive, because everybody in the family, we had an extended family, knew about my mom and my grandma. So they didn't make fun of me, or they didn't make me singled out or something like that. But friends, yes, my friends were like, "What are you doing?" It's like, they used to make fun of me. And I'm like, you're a sucker. You don't know anything. So why should I be? I was very arrogant, really. I didn't care what they said. They made fun of me. They called me names. They said, she'll never come to play. She's going to sing. I'm like, yes, I am. You don't have anything to do. So you go in the playground and you waste your time. It was I was very arrogant. And I was very proud of my culture and my music. So they couldn't touch me. But at the same time, I missed out. I missed out on going on dates, or going to movies, or, hanging out with friends and dancing. I didn't do any of that. And now when I look back, and when I see American teenagers really living life, I'm like, oh, I didn't really do this. And sometimes I feel like, why did I not do it? You kind of look back and you question stuff. If I had done it, I would have been a different person. It would be different. It would be, I'm not saying good or bad. It would be different. And of course I question that. But I'm happy. I think I got something else. I sacrificed a lot, but I gained something. So it's about, what you get, what you lose. It's all about that.
Were you looking at America? Did you have a concept of what the States was, or what it represented in any way? No. America was a different planet. Or Europe or something. Because when you're in India, there are 1 billion people, more than that. So everything is just geared towards that. And I didn't really... although my mother exposed me to a lot of Western music, so she made sure I heard records of Bach and Mozart, or I heard Beatles, or I heard Bob Dylan, stuff like that. But I was not
I never thought I would be able to bring the two worlds together. I didn't.
It sounds like your studies were very regimented, very fixed, specific, not a lot of room for outside influence.
Not when you're doing that tradition,
Yeah.
no. Outside that tradition, yes. Because we are encouraged in our culture to listen to the good things everything else has and actually take that.
Mm-hmm.
Try to incorporate that in your art. Maybe not necessarily singing-wise, but just development-wise.
Mm-hmm.
So even when I went to college, in my library, I had every record. Leonard Cohen, Aretha Franklin, Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, you name it, and we had a record. We had classical, amazing composers to listen to at our disposal. So mostly I always spent time there.
Mm-hmm.
And basically in my college, I was exposed to a lot of different kind of music.
And where was your college?
In Bombay, in South Bombay.
Did you feel when you went to college that you finally sort of found people your age who were also interested in the same kind of thing?
Actually, yes. Very good question. I never thought about it. But yes, I did. Because I went to music school. Music, like it was parallel to Berklee School of Music. Something like that in Indian classical music. And when I went there, it was a girls' school. So we were all girls hanging out. And they were all amazing in what we did. But they were also very curious about, especially my friends were curious about what was going on outside Indian classical music. And we went to this college called St. Xavier's, and we attended some of their concerts and, learned a little bit. But of course, the way a kid would hear and learn in America, obviously that was not the kind of exposure I got because I was in a different country. But I was aware of a lot of stuff. Beatles was my favorite, and by the time we were teenagers, they were obviously gone.
Sure.
But still, my professors always encouraged us to listen to them. They said, there's something different about them. What do you think? And we had a project about them. So what do you think is different about Beatles that is not different about anybody else? So that's how we were.
What was your answer?
I thought they were very innovative. And the concepts they brought, for instance, I think they were a pioneer in introducing Indian sounds. George Harrison brought the sitar and he wrote songs in Tintal. That was very, very different and new in that time, at that time. So that's what we were thinking, when we were 14, 15 years old. But we felt like that is very cool and different. For 60s, it was pretty much ahead of their time.
In a sense, I think what you're describing, especially the influence of George Harrison, has a direct connection to what you do.
Absolutely. He was the first person to even, bring an Indian instrument. He is the main person how American music has embraced at least the South Asian culture. I think because of George Harrison, Ravi Shankar ji came and he brought this entire different sound to the Western ear. And after that, all of us had an opportunity to share something we know. But I think without Beatles, this was not possible. I don't think America would be exposed or the West would be exposed to anything of this caliber if there was no Ravi Shankar or George Harrison.
So now what were the circumstances that brought you to the States?
I was in my master's program and my husband, Gaurav, who I'm married to right now, and I have been married to for the longest time, he was very interested in learning Indian music, and he's from Texas. He's an Indian American born and raised in Texas. And when he went to Boston and then for school, and after he took a year off from his college to come to India and actually study from real gurus and teachers what this art was, because he's really curious about this. And he's a trained pianist, he's a Western musician, so he studied a lot about this culture and was curious about knowing my culture. So he ended up in my class with the private teachers that I studied with. And I think we just clicked because, I don't know, it was meant to be or not, I don't know. But it was just, we just happened to fall in love studying music with various teachers in India. And I think we just, every day we used to go to a concert or check out some music, or there was a connection, very special one. And after that, he came to America and he's like, you should come and explore this country. And my father and mother were like terrified. I'm like, no way, we're not sending my daughter there. And then he's like, yeah, but I really love her. So then they were like, okay, we'll get married. And, so then my parents were at peace.
So did you get married before you came?
No, actually. We got engaged.
Uh-huh.
And then I came here when I was engaged. But then we got quickly married because they would not let me stay here without marriage. They're very traditional. So we got married, and then rest is history. But that was the basic reason I came to America, because I fell in love with my husband.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just took this connection to a different level. And now we both are in a band, and we do music together. We write songs. And it's just, I think music keeps us together.
Were you defining yourself as Falu at that point, or did that come when you came to the States?
No. I was not Falu.
Yeah.
No, I was just an Indian classical Falguni Shah, just a student.
Mm-hmm.
I think we started. Gaurav already had a band here called Karishma, and they used to do different kind of traditional music called ghazals. It had a lot of Sufi implications. It has a lot of Urdu poetries, and they had a band who were touring band in college circuit, because they were all college students. So they were not serious about making a career or something, but everybody was from Harvard, MIT, on that area, and
enclave of colleges,
right? And they just started touring, and then I joined. And until I joined the band Karishma, they used to do cover songs. So it could be either a nice Bollywood cover, or it would be a ghazal that has already been sung by a great singer, and they would just cover it. And then I was questioning the repertoire. So I asked them, why are you not writing your own songs? If you're doing such great stuff, why don't you write your own compositions? And that's where the whole thing started. And actually, the first composition we did was my composition that I did in my college. And we started our journey with that. And then what happened is, the Karishma band, they were all professionals. So one was a doctor, one was a scientist, one was an MIT business guy. So for them, music was a weekend stuff. They could never leave their jobs on a weekday and go and do shows. Whereas for me, I was a full-time musician. If I sat at home from Monday to Friday, that just didn't feel right. And why should I just sit waiting for them to start doing shows? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
In the weekend. So I got a record deal in New York, where actually Mark Tivarson comes in.
Mm-hmm. Our mutual friend Mark Tivarson.
Our mutual friend Mark Tivarson was my first musician in actually New York, who I started working with. He was introduced to me by a very good friend, Andy Sanesi. Mm-hmm. So he was my drummer at that time. And then he brought in Mark, Borum, Justin Wallace, all the cats. And then we just formed a band. And I've been working with Mark for like 10 years now.
Yeah.
So it's been a journey. They would not even smoke in front of me.
Because they wanted to be careful and respectful?
They were like, oh, it's Falu. It's kind of, I come from a different culture, so they used to respect that. Now they're not doing that anymore.
And how do you feel? Do you feel that means I
feel close to them.
Yeah.
Because they feel very comfortable. But in the beginning, Mark would not smoke in front of me, or, they wouldn't curse. They had so much, they were very respectful about my background, which was so sweet, because they didn't have to do that. But
there's this question that's been sort of like on my mind about you, about whether or not you feel like you are a representative of something. You're sort of like an ambassador in a way. And when you talk about your childhood, it obviously was unusual even for India, the kind of childhood that you had. But of course, we don't have that much exposure to this music, or honestly to a lot of Indian culture. And so somebody like you comes along, and I think a lot of people might be confused about whether or not you're sort of a normal representative of where you come from, or an unusual kind of specimen.
Well, a lot of young people like myself are doing this, but they're not in big numbers. So either you're coming from a very, traditional classical gharana or school. So your father is a famous classical musician, and then the son took it over, or the daughter took it over. I was a little different, because my mother was not, she didn't come from a classical, gharana or a school. She sang, and my grandmother sang, but they were not, Zakir Hussain or Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahab. They were not anything like that. We were a, very normal traditional family. So for me, it was difficult to come up. Because I had no hand-holding. Nobody would, ever, help me out to get a gig, or nobody would recommend me. I came up with struggles. I came up with learning by my mistakes. What should I have not done? So my journey was very difficult. Some of my peers, they have their fathers or mothers who have already carved the path for them. So they just have to walk on it. It's easier. For me, there was nothing like that. Even when I came to America, I had to make my own path.
Yeah.
I don't have a role model of following somebody. Oh, she did that. Let me just follow that. No. Even now I'm struggling. I have to see what works, what doesn't, and then learn and then do better the next time. So my journey has always been about making mistakes and learning and doing better. So I'm a student. I always feel like I'm learning.
I wonder if coming to the States actually was a gift in that way, because it's very open here.
I would say something. I think coming to the States has been the best thing in my life, because the embrace and the welcome that I've gotten here, I don't think people would have been so open-minded about welcoming what I'm doing there now. Now they are, because now we made the top 20 in India and iTunes. But back then, 15 years ago, maybe not, I'm not sure. But obviously, I was very young. I was a teenager, and I didn't have, a parent who was already famous. I had a parent who was very talented and who was very strict and disciplined, and obviously a musician, but nothing like, oh my God, she's a daughter of Ravi Shankar, or she's a daughter of, I don't have that.
It's an interesting distinction, because as you described your childhood, I did make that leap that isn't there, which is, you say your mother was very musical and that she instilled this in you young. And so there was a kind of assumption that even I made, which was, well, maybe you had some advantage. And you did have advantage because you had somebody who understood the music.
Right. In that way, I had an advantage because my mom's musical.
Yeah.
But my mom was not Ravi Shankar. And so many kids who are now doing music are from my style of families, because now there is also an awareness in India that you can survive.
Is that a newer sense in India?
Yes, it is very new. Because even there, Indian parents generally want their children to have security, become a doctor, lawyer, architect, and, because they don't believe like you're going to succeed.
Yeah.
Or they don't believe that this can support you. So even families like mine who are, great, mom is a great musician, but not Ravi Shankar, can think about, maybe my child can do this full time. There is a possibility that is opening up. It's not open yet, but it's happening.
So maybe I need to invert my question. My question to you was, do you feel like a representative of India in America? But actually, it sounds like what you're doing in the States could be a kind of a representation back in India for what's possible.
Actually, it's happening. Yes, I do. I do feel that I have this rich tradition and I can be an ambassador of that tradition. I also feel that I have opened up doors for middle-class family people, middle-class family children to pursue their dream. Yes, why not? You can do it. You absolutely can do it. You just have to be open, and you don't have to be afraid of failures. Mm-hmm. And don't give up and just be stubborn. I'm very stubborn and I'm very thick-skinned, not only in music, but I think whoever I've talked with, I would like to think they have been inspired that it is possible to do something that is not a secured doctor or a lawyer route.
I mean, this first story that you tell about walking into your husband's rehearsal or band and saying, well, why don't you write? To be new in a new culture, in a new place, introduced to a new group of people, and immediately start to assert yourself in that way, it makes it clear that you are thick-skinned and that you're also, you have strong ideas about what you want to do.
I'm actually really, really strong. And sometimes it hurts you because I have a very strong personality. And I know my vision and I know what I want. And sometimes it's wrong. And you know what? If it's wrong, I am not afraid to be wrong. It's okay. I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I will do it next time. I will do the right thing next time. But if you don't even try, then you don't even know that it's going to work.
Yeah.
I'm very adventurous. And I think that has helped in trying, because we did this indie Hindi sound.
Yes.
That Mark, Boram, Justin, Gaurav, and Shomo, all of them were very big support of really like believing in it. Because if you're trying to make a new genre or a new sound, you don't really find followers that easily or believers. for that matter. So you have to start from scratch.
I was going to ask you about this moniker, this title, Indie Hindi, because I've read it in relation to you, and I wasn't sure if it was something that you created or was something that was sort of applied to what you were doing later on, how you felt about it.
No, we created it because what we did is in the first album, it's called Falu, we have songs that are based on ragas, the Indian melodic scales. But we also made sure that the lyrics and the arrangement and all of that was in English and Western. So given that my tradition is so old, we have kept that tradition in the song, but we've treated it with the most amazing modern sounds, and obviously it's in English. Mm-hmm. So an American will have no problem listening to what the song says, because sometimes when you're listening to a different language, you understand the soul and you feel it, but a person becomes curious of what is it really saying? What is the song about? So we made them we made it very easy. Mm-hmm. So that was our first album, and then we did a lot of shows with it, and it did well. Mm-hmm. We created this genre Indie Hindi, and then afterwards we decided to go back and embrace our roots. So we went back to India with some of the band members who could come, and we recorded the next album, which was Forest Road in Bombay, with the local folk musicians there and classical musicians. So what we tried to do was bridge our American training with the roots of where I come from. Mm-hmm. And that album also did, relatively fine. And that's Forest Road. Now, the third project that we're trying to do,
which is what you're working on right now.
Yes. And actually, there are two parallel projects that we're doing right now. One would be embracing the Urdu poetry and ghazal, a style called ghazal, Ghazal. And I think it's such a rich and soulful tradition that we're trying to bring it in America. Obviously, people have done it, but we want to really make it the mainstream song, mainstream music. And I know it will be different because the language is different. It's Urdu, and it's very popular in South Asia. But what we're trying to do is we will be translating in some way or the other in English, so the poetry doesn't, fall off. Mm-hmm. That the whole style of this music is the emphasis on its poetry, and the poetries are so beautiful and they're so soulful. And I feel like if I do it in the right way, I think it'll be connecting souls from every continent.
There have been recently, and since you came to the States, some examples of some crossover. Slumdog Millionaire was probably the most successful example of a song resonating in the States. Jai Ho. And you mentioned when you first got here that your husband's band was already sort of exploring Bollywood. Mm-hmm. And what was your impression of Bollywood music before you came, and has it changed since you've been here? Interestingly
enough, even though I grew up in Mumbai, Bombay, my household was never very, very big on Bollywood songs. My household was big on classical music, folk music. So obviously growing up in Bombay, you go in a train, you listen to Bollywood. You go in a department store, there's Bollywood. So I always listened to it. And there are some amazing composers like R.D. Burman or Khayyam or Kalyan Jananji. They're really good composers. And obviously A.R. Rahman, who I work closely with sometimes. These are brilliant, brilliant composers, and I'm very, very happy to be talking about this next project. As I said, we're doing two projects parallel. One is the Ghazal Urdu poetry, and second, we're launching Falu's Bollywood Orchestra on May 3rd through Carnegie Hall. That is another style of bringing Bollywood music, but again with a twist. So we're not going to just sing those songs the way it was recorded. No. We are going to completely, obviously the melody will be same, the lyrics will be same, but the arrangements are going to be in a way that people have not heard. Mm-hmm. When you grow up in India, you cannot escape from Bollywood. Let's say that's how crucial and that's how ingrained that music is in India now. Even when I was growing up. And back then, there was a lot of good songs, classic Bollywood songs that sometimes I figure, like, why are people not making songs like this? Mm-hmm. For instance, I would sing a song, Rena Biti Jai, Shamna aaye rana beeti jaye. This song has two beautiful ragas in it. And the way R.D. Burman has composed this and brought both ragas in one composition, it is flawless and it is amazing. And I've never heard anything like this. It's my favorite Bollywood song, which I'll obviously perform. So you take the best elements of it and you just leave the din-chak, 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 din-chak behind, because I'm not a big fan of that. There is good dance music. I would like to do that, but I'm not going to do din-chak, din-chak. I'm not going to do that. So the cheesy element is going to be put aside and the good classic element is going to be taken. You know, in America, it's funny. There are two main music that Americans kind of know. First is classical. Obviously, they love Indian classical music.
Yes.
Any style, Hindustani, Carnatic, doesn't matter. They gravitate towards that because that's something so exotic. It's very exotic. It's special. It's very old. It's pure. Blah blah blah. The second thing that they gravitate to is Bollywood. For instance, Jai Ho. Jai Ho made it, right? So these are two, and it's funny to me because growing up in India, these are two very different
worlds.
Extremely different worlds. Now, people who listen to Bollywood not necessarily go and attend a concert at NCPA, which is the classical venue, and vice versa. So, but in America, I can find an audience that will embrace both in the same show. So if I'm doing a classical raga, they will love it. If I'm doing a Bollywood song, they'll love it. And this openness and this warm welcome is something I feel very happy and lucky to get, because I think I'm at the right spot at the right time, with the right people, with the right musicians, and with the right team. And everything coming together in this lifetime is a blessing. How many people can say that they have everything? Touch wood, but I think I'm in the right time. I'm not like Beatles, who was very ahead of their time. They did amazing. I don't have words for them, but they're ahead. They're in the 60s. At that time, there was not this much awareness. But now, because of Jai Ho and Ravi Shankar and all that, people know. If you say Bollywood, people know. They're like, yeah, we know. The dancing and the singing and the colors and that's what they associate Bollywood with. And it's true, you know. It's very upbeat, happy music and happy movies, and it's cool.
I think maybe Americans also associated a little bit with the early musical films, that it's a kind of genre that disappeared for us. But if you look at the older films in the States, it somehow feels nostalgic in a way. It was there. It's not there now, but I still see it in the Broadway. Broadway type. You know, when we go to see those shows, I see that, and that reminds me of actually India. Yeah. That reminds me of Bollywood, because when you see a Broadway show, like Lion King or whatever, it's the same concept of 2 hours of sheer entertainment and escape. They basically make you escape to a different world. Yes. And it's colorful and it's upbeat and you forget yourself. And that's exactly what Bollywood does. Do you think that style of entertainment, escapist entertainment, has emerged in India because there is so much poverty?
Absolutely. The reason an average Indian would go and see a movie is to forget about his life. Because honestly, India is a very diverse and a very diverse in all ways, I would say. You know, obviously so many languages and so many cultures, but also the difference between rich and poor. It just kills me. You know, we wrote a song on it called Copper Can in the first album. It's just, when you grow up there, you sort of get used to little children begging on the streets. You get used to that because that's what you see. When you go to America, there is no little children begging in the street, because here you have shelters and they're taken care of by the government. They don't have infrastructure. So given that, when a person is really struggling to put their daily lives together, music or cinema becomes a way for them to escape the brutal reality of their existence. And that's where Bollywood speaks, because they take you somewhere where an average person can never imagine. Like nowadays there's a trend of shooting in New Zealand and Australia and Europe, and they show you these beautiful countries and beautiful parts of those countries to an Indian audience, and they're like, oh my God, I want to go to Switzerland and check out the Alps. You know what? You have Himalayas. You have a taller mountain range and bigger mountain range than the Alps.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, you don't value that because it's yours. So I see that because I came to America.
Yeah.
I saw that, oh my God, Mount Everest and the Himalayan range is the most spectacular nature view or beauty anybody can see in this world. And after I came to America, I went to Himalayas 4 times to see my own country, my own beauty that I never thought of. But because I went to movies and I saw Switzerland and I saw Alps, I'm like, I want to go to the Alps. Yeah, you should. But also don't forget your own thing. So this is where I start, appreciating what my culture and my country has more than when I was there.
I think that there are 2 forces at work, what I'm hearing, and I wonder. One is, of course, anybody who leaves their home is able to see it with new eyes.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting because I've spoken to other people from completely different cultural and national backgrounds who come to the States and have similar experiences. They're able to see their own native culture with fresh eyes when they're away. Of course, you can't see the whole thing when you're inside of it. But the other thing that I think is so interesting about your story is that you arrived, and you said you're right on time, at a time when you had second-generation Indian Americans who were fully American, totally immersed in American popular music, and now curious to go back to where they came from. Your husband, Mark Tewerson. And that timing couldn't have happened 50 years earlier because that generation of immigrants hadn't come yet.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a really wonderful part of your story, is that you sort of came into contact with people who were not familiar firsthand with the Indian musical tradition, but they were very curious to kind of get in touch with it again.
If I had come 10 years earlier, I would be dealing with, obviously I'm Mark's generation, so I'm not their parents' generations. I'm the second generation. I belong here with that generation. But that generation didn't really, they tried to teach their children the values and the culture, but the problem is they didn't have support structure. They didn't have communities yet that were already built to support that tradition and the culture. But my generation, for example, my kid, I have a 4-year-old son, and for him to learn Indian music and culture is very easy. Why? You know why? Sunday school is already established, or your grandparents already are free now. They're retired and they can teach you all the songs that we do in our day-to-day life. But my husband didn't have that. He didn't have grandparents, or he didn't have a community, or he didn't have Sunday school already established for him to learn. So he came to India. So I think because I was born late, it was an advantage.
Yes.
And the timing right now to do anything in America is spot on because everybody is open and curious.
That being said, the timing could not be worse in terms of the business of music.
Right. Business of music. Oh, my God. That's a whole another interview, I guess.
I guess so. But, it's funny because I heard you say, well, we made the top 20 in iTunes in India.
Right.
So obviously, although you're very rooted in the States, you're also looking outside of the States in terms of where your records might resonate.
The top 20 India iTunes that we made was 2 songs. One is called Jagne, which is from our second album. Oh. And the first album song that made it there was Angel. And Angel was our band's favorite song. It never was a song that anybody in the audience would say, oh yeah, once more. It was never that song. Angel is a song about questioning God and questioning the existence of the Almighty. Like, do you even... my band is full of geeks and nerds and obviously cool people, but they question everything. Sure. They're like, why are we even alive? Why is this? What is the atom? What is the molecule? They're all scientists and they're brilliant. And they don't believe in God, and I do, and they make fun of me. And we kind of, we fight a lot. And I think that song came out of the quest of knowing God. And in America, it got response, sure, but it didn't become a top 20. But that song, it's so funny, in India was at top 20. And I'm like, it's interesting how spirituality crosses over.
It's very interesting to me when you say that the boys didn't want to smoke a cigarette in front of you or curse, but they weren't afraid to discuss the existence of God with you. And it shows that there are certain conversations that are universal, cross-cultural boundaries, and other things that maybe we're careful about.
They were careful about the American things.
Yeah.
Like, we don't want to piss off her, but, I was also young.
Yeah.
I never tried smoking before. I appreciated that they respected me, but out of that came this amazing dynamics of what they portray about me, what I portray about them. And because you have dynamics in the band, that's how you write songs. That's how everybody's personality comes out in music. And that's what actually made our sound so unique. Because Mark Tevarson is a complete Boston-born musician, Indian-American, but not really. He wasn't exposed to a lot of Indian music before he started working with us. And then he went back to India with us, and he married a yoga teacher.
Yes.
So... I'm not saying that I'm the only soul influence. No, I'm sure he has a lot of other influences, but we did open up a world for him, and he opened up a world for me that I would never think I would know. He would do jazz improvisations. He's very nicely trained in classical, and he's extraordinary in songwriting and arrangement, and just the way he listens to music and he thinks about it. Actually, we call him an ustad, because to me, Mark is an ustad. It's like the scholar of... He is such a great musician. His understanding of notes is no lesser than any pandit or any teacher or guru from India. I think like he is the same level as any of our teachers would be. And so is Gaurav. Gaurav actually understands both.
Yes.
So that he was basically a bridge between me and the band.
Yes.
Or me and the outside world, because he could speak both languages. He could speak both cultures, both music. So without Gaurav, I think our band would have fell apart. But because of such interesting characters and such interesting people I got in my life, I think, and even the band is surprised that India actually accepted our question about, does God exist?
Yes, that this is an acceptable question.
While India is a very spiritual country, but they accepted our, maybe like a smirking remark of, I don't know if he's alive or if he exists. And in America, I don't think I'm allowed to even ask that.
Such an interesting question, isn't it? Because in the United States, we are supposed to be the freest place to ask these questions and talk about anything we want, but there are some taboos that we haven't been able to get past, and one of them is God. We haven't had a president who's ever been able to say, I'm an atheist. I mean, I think as any politician, it's very difficult, and even as an entertainer, it's challenging, I think, to be a huge entertainer and say, I don't think I believe in God. I don't think the States has confronted that.
And that is why when that happened, our minds were kind of confused, because how did a spiritual country like India accept that question? Whereas here, it was a song, sure.
Yeah.
And there was nothing there, no reviews. But how did that happen?
Yeah.
And that it's like, maybe we need to open up a little bit of our minds.
Yeah.
In the United States, I'd say. That
reminds me to ask you if, in addition to meeting these characters when you came here, if there was any music of the moment that you encountered in the States, in New York or in Boston, that you hadn't been exposed to in India, and if that had any influence on you.
Absolutely. Oh my God. I would love to talk about it. Nirvana. Grunge. The minute I was in Boston, I think it was my second year in America, and somebody gave me, I was studying at Berkeley and teaching at Tufts. So in one of those libraries, I heard Nirvana and Kurt Cobain. Oh my God, I can actually give away my music for him. That's how much I love him. And I often listen to his songs, and I Google his interviews, and I really, he passed away before I even came here. Yeah. So it's very sad. Obviously, like he's a big star, so I don't know if I could ever meet him, but I always feel like that genre, grunge, speaks to me like nothing has ever spoken. And it really surprises me, because I'm a classically trained musician who is very who thinks that a note is very pure. And when you say sa, nothing around it should be disturbed, right? And for me to put come as you are, right? And listen to that, really butchered and, I think it's kind of abused voice. But the feeling that I get when I listen to grunge music is out of this world. I have never felt it anywhere else. And I think it's very raw. It's so raw that it just sits in my gut. And it just affects me like nothing else has ever affected me. Even sometimes more than classical. Mm-hmm. When I'm looking for peace, I listen to Kurt Cobain. Mm. I don't know why, but some things have no answers.
Yes.
And it's a mystery, and it'll always be a mystery for me.
Yeah. Did it enter in your music?
Honestly, I tried to sing like that, but no, I couldn't.
Yeah.
It just didn't.
Yeah.
I am not trained to ever sing like that.
Yeah.
So I don't even try to do it, but the energy that his songs have was something I would like to try. Mm-hmm. I haven't done it yet, but I'm very open and really close in my Bollywood to try grunge mixing with Indian Bollywood. I want to do that, and I'm going to do that. And we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
But it's an experiment. It can go either way. But as I said, I'm a very adventurous person.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, I'm not afraid of being blamed of what the hell is she trying to do?
Yeah, you said that before, and it's a very powerful instinct to say, I'm prepared to fail big. If I fail, let me have failed at doing something that I really tried to do.
Yeah.
I find personally that I hold myself back due to fear of failure. I think a lot of people do. What if I fail? What if it doesn't work? Maybe I need to be more careful. I mean, I think there's something wonderful about allowing yourself to fail because you cannot succeed without the possibility of failure.
Absolutely. I mean, what is the worst that can happen? They're going to say, she tried so, it was rubbish, it was bad, it was horrible. Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
It was an experiment. And
Yeah.
I won't do it next time.
Yeah.
But if I don't try, I will regret my entire life of not doing something that spoke to me so beautifully.
Yes.
And I don't want to be 80 years old and look back and say, I never tried grunge. Why not?
You mentioned earlier that there are sort of these two strains of Indian music that are familiar in the States, and one is Indian classical music and the other is Bollywood. There's this third strain, which is in the kind of culture of yoga. And I know that you're actually associated with a number of these kind of music for yoga records and that there are festivals. What's your relationship with that like, and what do you make of it?
It's very nice that you bring this up because remember I said in my childhood, I was trying to be classical, but in my house, we had Vedas, we had Upanishads, we had that music, meditation music playing constantly because of spirituality, because of our religion. And I often wonder, and I will be doing it very soon, maybe not this, but next project. I am going to penetrate into my childhood roots, which is spiritual music, which is yoga music, which is shlokas or the hymns, or just the way just the way, supposing this hymn. Om Asito ma sadgamaya tamso ma jyotirgamaya mrityor ma mritam gamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So when we woke up in the morning, we did this prayer. When we went to sleep we did this prayer. So it is in my blood. And I feel...
What does the prayer mean?
It's a Shanti Pat. That means prayer for peace. And prayer for just the calmness of your soul, mind, and body. All three combined. And it's chanting for that. And I may know at least 1,000 chants just growing up and going to temple with my grandma, because this is where we grew up. This is something that my mother sings, my father sings, everybody in the community sings, and we do prayers. And fortunately, I was religious, so I have been trained with the right pronunciations and the right way of doing it. Because sometimes I hear people, they don't say the right pronunciations. They would say asato ma sadagamaya. It's actually wrong, and I know the right ways. So it's just a time when I'm going to be doing an album of chanting and meditation and yoga music.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be the next project. I mean, after I finish my 2 current projects, that may be something I penetrate into, because I don't even have to work on it. It's like something I do
there.
every day.
When you say, once the pronunciation is lost, it becomes wrong.
Yes.
It
loses the power.
In the States, as culture is absorbed into the mainstream of American culture, it is, I think, by definition, diluted. The more people it's able to reach, the deeper it's able to penetrate into the sort of popular culture, the more it loses.
It's going to be more diluted.
It's going to
if
be more
somebody
diluted.
doesn't do a right way of doing these chants, in 50 years, we will just be doing these chants without any effect, because it's all wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to do something.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let this thing just get off and lose its power. Because when you do a shloka or a chant, for example, the Gayatri Mantra, Om Bhur Bhuvasvaha Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. This is exactly how it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Any other little change will take away the power of this chant. The power of these shlokas and the hymns and the chants, they stay alive, because otherwise we are actually misdirecting the whole culture, American culture, that is so welcoming to this oldest tradition of yoga. And it is embracing it, but it would be a disservice for me not to correct.
Yeah.
Whatever I have learned, I am not saying like I'm an expert, but I have learned it the right way. And I know the language. I know Sanskrit. We studied it in our school. So the way people speak Spanish here, we speak Sanskrit.
Yes.
So it's our day-to-day language. It's not like, I had to go to another school to learn it. No, it's ingrained. And if I don't do it, I think it'll be wrong. It'll be a disservice to the whole community who is so open, and actually they want to learn yoga and they want to learn this tradition. You know what? I'm here.
Yes.
And I want to offer myself.
What language do you speak with your son?
Gujarati. I know I can speak 5 languages, but that is my mother tongue, and he speaks fluent Gujarati. I made sure that he learns my mother tongue, because if he loses the language, he loses the culture. And he's a 3rd generation American. So hello, how hard it is for him to forget it. It's very easy.
Very easy.
Yeah, but it's a rule in our house. The minute he takes his shoes off and he enters the apartment, he switches. I tell him I don't know English. So if you want your mama, you want your mommy, you have to speak in Gujarati.
Yes.
That's how we learned.
What did your parents ultimately decide about your moving to the States? I know when you said when you first came, they thought, oh no, we don't want to send her there. Did they?
They were very afraid, because this is a very different, it's a different planet for them. But then they visited me 4 or 5 times. My mother came 6 times. My father came only twice. But they came to my Carnegie Hall concerts, the debut ones, the big ones, the small ones, everything. And they were like, no, she's doing really, really well. And, even in India, the Economic Times, they actually did, I don't know, I shouldn't say this, but I was in the top 20 women, global influenced Indian woman who made it. So my father is now very proud. Mm-hmm. He was, though, very reluctant about, oh my God, my daughter doesn't want to be a doctor, and, what is she going to do? But now he's like, I am so proud that you did not choose medicine. And I'm so proud you were so stubborn.
Yes.
And you chose your dreams, and you kind of fought with me, and you were a rebel. I have always been a rebel. My father didn't like it, but now he's accepted, and he's actually very proud.
The Economic Times singled you out among 20 influential women.
20 most successful global influential Indian women.
Did you see that coming?
Nope. Absolutely not. Because being recognized in India is a completely different ball game. In America, I'm unique. I'm exotic. Of course, I'll be appreciated because this culture is all about that. In India, I'm one of them. And it's more than 1 billion people. So to be picked up there and appreciated and recognized in India, I honestly, I don't think I have still digested it, because it's such a big honor to be recognized by your own people, by your own government, by your own critiques of Indian classical music, and they know this. They're not going to just pick up anybody and say, because they know this. And you sing one note wrong and the critics will trash you. They're very hard. It's hardcore music. Yeah. So, and it's funny, like, I was the only musician who made the top 20.
Interesting.
And it was a big surprise and a big honor.
The fact that the critics will find any flaw in India because they're so familiar with the work is an enormous challenge to perform in that environment. Absolutely. Now, so much of your performance happens in the States, where a big part of the audience is not familiar with the music, and you have to keep yourself honest. Do you feel like a deeper sense of pressure or responsibility to make sure that you really are staying true when you're singing that music, because you might be singing to an audience that's not as deeply familiar with it?
It doesn't matter who I sing to. It is about my journey, my quest, and my loyalty and my honesty. So if I slip, I don't care what they think or they will write. If I slip, it's a slap on my own face. So if I'm not that dedicated and that honest to my own art or my own music, I'll fall. And to date, I practice every day. Every day I wake up and I'm on my tanpura and I sing every day, because if I don't like what I'm doing, that is the biggest failure. That I'm afraid of. Mm-hmm. That failure I'm afraid of. I don't want to fall in my own eyes.
Yes, exactly.
That failure I cannot survive. But the other failure, I welcome.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey and your story with me,
Thank
Falu.
you for having me.